Hello, and welcome to Healing Tips from the Heart, Intuition with Helpers, Healers, and Guides. I am your host, Dr. Lori Hops, licensed psychologist, writer, and artist. I've explored mind, body, and spirit related to intuition, or your personal guidance system, since early childhood. Meet my guests who have learned from their personal and professional lives to explore vast realms of knowing, synchronicities, and overcoming challenges. Their stories may inspire you with tools to enhance your daily living and relationships. Hello, everyone, and welcome my special guest today, Ted Blickwedel. Ted is a Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel and combat veteran who became a licensed clinical social worker after he retired from the military. He worked as a counselor at the VA Vet Center in Warwick, Rhode Island from 2009 to 2018, where he provided mental health care for fellow veterans. In 2017, during his tenure at the Vet Center, he began to speak truth to power in an effort to have the VA Vet Center management revise their clinical productivity policies that were harmful to both counselors and the quality of care for veterans. After a long journey, the United States Congress finally passed legislation that was signed into law, which ensures the VA leadership is accountable for protecting the quality of services to our veterans and their families, as well as safeguarding the welfare of counselors who care for them at over 300 vet centers nationwide. And Ted was instrumental in making this happen, which he'll be talking about in a few moments. He has been featured in the media on NBC and NPR and other publications and local news broadcasts. And his book called Broken Promises chronicles this ordeal, as well as the unjust and tactics that he says were toxic and retaliatory against him by the VA officials in attempts to silence him. This is such vital and important work, and I'm so thrilled to have you here in person with me today, Ted. I welcome you and so glad that I got to meet you through the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology many years ago. Have the thrill to see you in person, and I'm so happy to have you here. So welcome, welcome.
Well, thank you, Laura. It's great to be here with you today.
Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to share about your introduction or anything else for today?
Well, I think in addition to that, it should be noted that as a result of all this, I became involved in Whistleblowers of America, and this past spring I was inducted into their board of directors and have been active in that regard. And our focus is to, with our annual conferences every year and in between in DC, usually in September, is to meet with politicians and promote stronger legislation that truly protects whistleblowers and safeguards them against the types of tactics used against people when they speak truth to power to report waste, fraud, and abuse and misconduct. And we also have a peer-to-peer program for whistleblowers. And in addition to that, another track that I helped initiate starting this year is bringing in energy psychology interventions and self-care techniques into the conference to help whistleblowers become aware of what's available to them to deal with their trauma, because many of them have not, as I had witnessed over the last couple of years. In fact, I haven't really met one that has.
Wow.
It's really unfortunate. They are really traumatized. It's a special group, um, in regards to the types of trauma they experience. And for me personally, it was more traumatic than a combat experience because of the level of moral injury and betrayal. And so that's what you're kind of dealing with. It's complex PTSD. related kinds of things. And fortunately, this year, I've been able to get Bob Bray, who's a part of the Association for Energy Psychology, who's been a practitioner and a trainer himself for 30 years. It's coming in for the last afternoon of our conference on the 13th of September to run a session with people and then with resources as a follow-up afterwards. So people have a means to do so at the end of the conference.
Oh, great. Yeah, Bob Ray is one of our foundational people in thought field
Mhm.
therapy, which was the origin
Yes,
of that whole field of energy
right.
psychology.
Mhm.
That's so wonderful, Ted. I'm so glad to hear that. All that you're doing, you've done so much. I mean, you more than deserve a vacation on some tropical space
And
like your
someday
background.
I may have this behind me as my backyard in Maui. Who knows?
So, you bring up such a vital point about this moral injury. And for those who don't know, can you describe a little bit more about what that is? Because what you said is so striking that the injuries that you experienced as a veteran, well, in combat, pale in comparison to the trauma and the depth of despair and injury that you had from your colleagues.
Right. And so with moral injury, like with a combat veteran, that can come, in different levels, both for what you do and don't do, let's say in a combat situation. That can work both ways, which includes, um, survivor guilt.
Mm,
Why did I survive and my buddy didn't, in the heat of battle with things that can happen pretty horrifically. And in the context of whistleblowers, it's the same kind of thing in the sense of um, you're doing the right thing morally and ethically and believing that this is the right thing to do with the intent that whatever you're bringing up is going to be corrected, doing it in a tactful, professional type of manner. And you expect, hey, let's come together but then, the bureaucracy, pushes back against you at any cost to defend their narrative and to not be accountable and go to extreme lengths to crush you and silence you in ways that, until you're in it, you almost wouldn't believe it. So, that's the moral injury part and very traumatic because that's a betrayal that's so deep. And much like Vietnam veterans, and they came back from Vietnam, the way they were treated, marginalized, discriminated against, and as a consequence, even as a combat veteran, I didn't understand the full trauma of a Vietnam veteran because of what happened to them when they came back, from their war, which didn't happen to me. And I really understood as a result of the whistleblower experience and the level of betrayal, how they felt coming back. And really, that kind of betrayal is worse than actual being in country and in combat somewhere, because
wow.
it's people you trust
Yep.
that you look up to, and then they turn around and you're defending your country, and then you come back and you're basically you know marginalized and treated very badly.
Yeah.
And it's horrific, and it's
Yeah.
worse than the actual trauma in the case of of a Vietnam veteran and their combat experience coming home and being treated like that. That trauma was worse than being in Vietnam, and you'll
Yeah.
hear that from a lot of them. And this was not much unlike that because of the level of betrayal against me when I tried to do the right thing for the right reasons, and they literally went out to destroy me, and it had a severe impact. Uh,
Absolutely. And I
and
think
I'm
that
still
this,
I'm still recovering. I've come a
yeah,
long way, but I'm still recovering, and there's things I did along the way to do that. But I've got some things to fine tune as well when it comes to anger and forgiveness. So that's kind of my focus in this part of my healing path. Even though I've come a long way, I still have work to do with that.
we all do. Yeah. Thank you for that. And, I'd like to expand the scope a little because I think anytime you have a trusting relationship where there's a betrayal, whether it's with family, I mean, it takes on a different feel when it's institutionalized and it's with with something that you align with your identity as being part of the the us, not the them. But I think that anyone listening who has had some form of rupture in a trusted relationship can understand and relate to that sense. It's degrees of how much moral injury, but the concept of it is not so foreign. You don't need to be specifically in your situation to have that be
Right.
relatable. But yeah, the healing journey, I mean, because that's the thing, like you said, the people that you're going to be with, the whistleblowers, they haven't worked on their own healing. They're stuck and trapped within this toxic.
And I'm talking people that have been in it, famous whistleblowers at
Yeah.
National Whistleblower Day in Washington, which is in July. It's a separate event from what we do with Whistleblowers of America, but that's run by National Whistleblower Center.
Hmm.
And I'm talking like famous whistleblowers, FBI, CIA had been involved in this, 10, 15, some 20 years, and getting very emotional when they're up there in public, speaking about these things, and very obviously haven't really recovered from that, certainly, to a large degree. And you speak with them individually, on the side, and it's, the rumination about different things and different aspects. It's obvious that a lot of them are still stuck in the trauma.
Yeah, and that's pretty common. I mean, not so many people know about the importance of using the body and the emotion and the energy field. Let alone psychotherapy. It's one thing that we have created, I believe, that's positive in the last, let's say, 100 years is speak. We've gotten that far. Speak about it. Spend time with words. I remember, growing up and just the shock on national television when the communal conversation started to be focused on things like abuse and neglect in the home and in society. And it was like these deep secrets were finally being unearthed just to give name. And so that's great, but it's not all. And so I think that's where people get stuck is in that speaking. I'm going to go speak about it and tell people.
Right. And
Yeah,
so, my experience with that, that's great because that's really the first step is becoming aware. And until you become aware, you really can't do anything. But okay, now that you've become aware, that's great. But then if you keep speaking about it and speaking about it over and over, you're really compounding the trauma
yeah,
because up to that point, you really haven't done anything to process it. So it's very important in how you speak about it and how you help someone, if you're working with someone, be regulated in speaking about it and at least have some tools, especially dealing with a somatic orientation that's going to allow someone to regulate, to process the impact of what's happened so they can release it. And unless you're doing that at a somatic level, as you well know with polyvagal theory, you're really not going to process the trauma.
yeah. It's
And this
almost
is
like
what
the tornado. It keeps spinning,
Mhm,
spinning, spinning. And not just
exactly.
speaking for self-awareness, but speaking to community is a really vital
Mhm,
thing too. But you're right. It's like you're sharing it. Other people are hearing you, so you feel
mhm,
connected. But the poison inside is still poison
mhm.
inside.
And for me, it was quite a journey. And this is something I don't speak about really hardly ever, but let the truth be told. And it's important for people to understand, and I'm willing to take the risk to share that part of it, especially since it didn't turn out badly.
Mm.
Um, but initially when the retaliation started with me, when I started, raising the flag about the issues with the compromised quality care and counselor burnout because of these harmful policies the VA was instituting, the retaliation was getting so bad. And basically what they did many things we don't have time to get into, but just understanding that the basic umbrella of the whole thing was painting me as a mentally unstable combat veteran to discredit me.
Okay.
That is the worst thing you can do to a veteran who really hasn't done anything wrong. And so I was so angry and so depressed. The first 4 months that this stuff's really kicked off on their part, and the gaslighting, the counter accusations, and the many of the things they did. And I don't have a proclivity for blood clots. And this is what blood tests revealed. And I ended up with a submassive pulmonary embolism that should have killed me. And I was in ICU for 4 days. And a month after that, I was having homicidal fantasies.
Oh.
And as a combat veteran, that's a very bad combination. And without going into detail on other things, that the bottom line was I have some serious means to carry it out, and I'll just
Mhm.
leave it at that. And um, you know, I was in a very deep and dark place. And fortunately, I chose the light, but it made me understand I'm someone that's, pretty much always had a spiritual orientation, working on myself in one way or another. And the fact that I could be driven to such a point, and I was on the fence, and it could have easily gone either way. And what scared me about that is, oh my God, if someone like me who has the spiritual healing orientation I do can be driven to that point, oh my God, people that don't have that orientation I do, they don't have a chance. And this made me understand what goes down, with the mass shootings and everything. And it's absolutely horrific as I was sitting back there and how sad it all is, but realizing with my skill set, I would look out there from a tactical point of view and think these guys don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to shoot, because if it was me, they'd still be picking up bodies. And it's just sad, how that is. But moving forward, I chose the light, did some things with someone I met at ASAP
Hmm.
who took me through an intensive, Michael Reddy, as you well know.
Yeah.
Right. And he had me come. This is important because there's different ways to approach these things, but this was so intense for me. And what got me on track for me to move forward and start healing and letting the stuff go was basically a type of a vision quest or healing quest, where he had me live in the woods by his cabin in Pennsylvania for a week, 4 days in between. In the middle, I had to fast that 4 days, attend to a fire ceremoniously in a Native American shamanic tradition, which he brought into that, being trained in shamanic medicine, and using energy psychology, EFT techniques, dream work, which was very profound,
Hmm.
and of course his work with family constellations in dealing with trauma and how all that works. Not only are you clearing the trauma for yourself, but also for your ancestral lineage. And it was very powerful, and it helped me reconnect with life, to reconnect with relations, and to come out of that with a sense of gratitude for all relations that were in support of me, as well as how we support each other, and really getting tuned back into that connectedness of the one consciousness that we all are at the core of our being. So that got me back on track, and then I started doing other things along the way to help in that process.
Oh my God, Ted, thank you so much for
Yeah,
sharing
because
that.
I was so desperate. It was kind of like, if this did not work, um,
You
I
were
may not
done.
be here, and there's a whole lot of other people that may not still be here.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Wow, wow, wow. Oh my God, there's so many layers here. First of all, let me just say, Michael Reddy has passed through his body. Uh, and so he's no longer in his physical self, but he's here and giving great gratitude and a huge hug to you for speaking such tender, vulnerable truth. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, Michael. You're still with us,
Yeah,
Michael. We haven't forgotten. It's been a little over a year now. Not much over a year.
yeah. Well, ironically, 2 years after what he did for me, he developed a very serious kind of uh, almost a neuropathic um, nerve pain in his
Right.
head, so
Yep.
severe.
His
Yeah,
eyes.
his quality of life had really seriously diminished. And in 2020, 2 years after what he did for me, he reached out to me and asked me, "Hey, I really need to do the same thing I did for you. And of all my students, you're the only one that really got it. I want you to facilitate my quest." And I'm like, gee, no pressure there. you know yeah, so I mean, I had some people in ASEP doing healing circles as I was down there doing what I did for him in kind, which worked out very well, in the end. But it was just kind of funny how the roles kind of reversed in that sense. And so yeah, he and I are definitely, kindred spirits, and I have a lot of gratitude for what he did for me, because it really helped me get back on track. Because like I said, if it wasn't for that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Things would be very different.
Hmm.
Thank you for all that, Ted. And now if we can just reflect for a few moments on this incredible journey you've been on in that shadow and light, walking that edge that you speak of, and how easy it is to slip into the turmoil and the rage and the revenge and the destruction. Wow. This is deep stuff. And I think that in the quietest moments, in the darkest places, people understand exactly what you're talking about. I know I do.
Well, I think a lot of people that have a trained eye, that do the kinds of things we do as healers, as therapists. And when I say healers, we aren't the healer. We just help facilitate the environment that allows people to do their work.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think, most people would in that context. I mean, there's a lot of people that wouldn't actually. A
Yeah.
lot of, yeah. So it's a
It's
mixed bag.
choices that we make.
Yeah.
And it's like we say we do all this work and training, have spiritual stuff and whatever. And I mean, not whatever, I don't mean to downplay it, but it happens and it's good and it's real, but it doesn't seep sometimes into the deepest pit of the root of the darkness, because we don't go there with it. We stay in the light, we stay in the hope, we stay in the peace, we stay in the promise. We're trying to lift ourselves up. But, I've been working a lot with painting lately, like kind of the last couple of weeks. I was ill and couldn't do a lot. So I started, and I've been painting, but I painted daily, and
Mhm.
just an explosion. And I see it kind of like watercolor, where you have the darker color that just seeps down when you lift the paper into the lighter, and it infuses and it goes deep, deep, deep. And we don't often combine our deepest fear, our deepest rage, our deepest hurts with that intense light, unless you are forced to. And it's a moral choice that you make.
That is very interesting the way you put that, because, unless the darkness is exposed by the light, you continue to some extent operating in the darkness, even unknowingly, unconsciously, because you haven't allowed yourself to go to the place to touch and navigate through those dark places, as you so called are shedding the light on it.
Yeah.
And for me, quite honestly, with what happened with me and the retaliation, the real story behind the story, with all that, VA whistleblowing, was the opportunity the universe gave me to go to those deepest, darkest places, pushing me to the envelope that allowed me to work through it. And I'm telling you, it was on the fence. It could have gone either way, but that was a circumstance given to me. And in that moment was a defining moment in this whole process, where I chose what I did and chose the light, or it would have ended very differently. And and that's what happens, is those extreme situations force us into acceptance of circumstance or whatever, to a point where, like the alcoholic that's brought to his knees, realizing they've hit bottom, they are given an opportunity and they start working the 12 steps or whatever, and a couple of years later, they'll thank God I'm an alcoholic, or I never would have come to terms with the real issues underlying what was really at the root of my drinking behavior to begin with. And in like kind, for me, I almost, and I've had these glimpses of gratitude for, thank God this happened to me and they treated me the way they did, because it gave me an opportunity to then, in a desperate situation, to have to make a choice. And without that circumstance, I would not have been faced with some of those deepest, darkest places in order to do that. In my case, it was extreme and dangerous in a way because I could have chose either. I mean, it was close. I could have chose either way, and
You know,
fortunately, I didn't, and became more resilient as a result of it.
yeah,
And now this is setting me up for the next part of my journey.
absolutely. And I just want to, I'm intuitive, and so I get a feeling sense of the audience. And there's at least one or more people who are going to hear this and say, but what about if you crossed over to the dark side? And because I have. And so I don't want people to think that all hope is lost if that's the case. There's always choice. Even when the worst things have happened, maybe even by your own hand or towards you or collectively, there's still, if you're alive, you have a choice moment in front of you. And we can have regret. You were talking about forgiveness. We can have regret, forgiveness, and we can repattern things even when people are gone, even when they've passed.
That's right.
Even if
Yeah.
you have no access to the situation again, but you're tormenting yourself
Hmm.
because of guilt, because of beating yourself up, because of wishing things that were different.
Hmm.
And you can't change the physical aspects, but you can change the dynamic. You can change your understanding to it. You can change the lessons that you've learned, and you can change the way you move forward. So I want to make sure that I say that.
Right. It's how you choose to internalize your experience. Because what's going on externally is simply just going on. It's not this, it's not that. What happens is we project what our internal state is, our prism, our beliefs onto our external world. So what we're really responding to, or I should say reacting to in many cases, is what we're projecting onto what we think we're seeing. And that's the grand illusion. So it's really all an internal journey, an awakening and awareness, and then in each moment, making a choice. And like Eckhart Tolle says, you know, who's a modern day spiritual teacher that a lot of people are aware of, I'm sure you are as well.
Mm.
He says the only thing that really matters when you break it all down, what he says is it's acceptance of what is unconditionally without judgment. And the bottom line is the only thing that really matters, it doesn't matter what you do. What matters is the level of consciousness you're bringing into what you do. And I'll even go so far as what Zen Buddhist monks will even say, it's not just even that, but the quality of conscious into what you say and even what you think. Because thoughts are things, what you think about grows, you manifest to become what you think about. You're already on a quantum energetic level, putting things in motion just by the direction your thoughts are going and what it is you're giving attention to. And in that moment, that's a choice, what you're giving attention to. So you can either feed the dark side or you can feed love. Because when it all comes down to what it comes down to, it all comes down to love or fear. You're
Yeah.
either coming from one of those two places. So in every given moment, what are you going to choose? Coming from fear or coming from love, which is the core essence of who and what we are at the core of our being.
Thank you for that. That was so beautiful. And it's reminding me, I did a little piece. So we were just at the Association for Comprehensive Energy Psychology conference we have it every year, some form or another, in person, online, some combination. And I had the opportunity to be involved in a spontaneous creation for peace. It was a circle of people standing around talking about conflict and the need to eradicate the addiction for warfare. And I thought, well, there's 10 of us here, master healers, and we're casually talking. And I said, let's do it now. And I put my hands up, and everyone caught it immediately. And they all put their hands up in the circle. And we started silently working on this notion to eradicate the addiction for warfare. And then someone said, what we need is peace. and I felt the energy like lift off and go through a skylight that we were standing near. And it was incredible. And so I was talking later with a friend, colleague friend, about what do we do with all of this? How can we extend this more? And the image that I had, Ted, was that not everyone's ready for love. And we need to understand that. Maybe love is the answer, but if love is seen as harmful or threatening or confusing or foreign, then it's going to cause more disruption and dysregulation in people. And that there needs to be a gentle, like the breeze behind you in your image. For those who are only listening, Ted has a background image of an ocean scene with the palm tree and breeze blowing through the palm fronds. And so this gentleness. And so what I saw was called the sieves of love. So you have like a sieve, which is like a basket with holes, and like you might be rinsing, let's say, shells from the ocean, and to have the debris wash through, so you have the little holes, or rinsing pasta. And so what happens is the things that are small enough easily pass through the holes to the next level. And what I saw was a graduation of sieves with large holes, smaller, 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 so that people, when they have enough love in their life, actually become less. They let go of their debris, they become smaller, and they're able to slip through the holes of the sieve to the next layer where they get infused with more love. And if they can't shrink small enough to the next layer, that's fine, they just move on. But that we have these successive layers of smaller and smaller holes that allow us to be more and more of our pure essence, which is love.
Yeah. And I wonder, you say, sometimes people aren't ready. Well, people aren't always ready for perhaps the next level of conscious awareness and acceptance for whatever reason. But what it really comes down to, because part of my process in all this was going through the Course in Miracles,
Okay.
which I did very diligently. I mean, I was so desperate still and moving on and healing that, and working on the forgiveness piece, which is the foundational essence of the Course in Miracles. I did each of those lessons 365 days, each day of the year, and really got into it and realized what's really going on is it's our misperceptions of what we think that is.
Mm-hmm.
It's letting go of what is not in order to see ourselves in that peace and love as we really are. It's comparable for an analogy purpose. It's like looking at the clouds in the sky that are blocking us from seeing the light of the sun, which is the essence of our being. And once we clear those clouds, now we can see the sun and ourselves as we really are, with the light, that's screaming to manifest through us, because that's what we're really here for, and manifesting through loving kindness and contributing to the flowering of human consciousness and beyond, which really is a universal thing, not even just this planet Earth. And so letting go of those misperceptions. So part of forgiveness, really, in one statement in A Course of Miracles that really stood out for me is, it would be something like this as an example. Gee, Lori, I forgive you for my misperception of what you never did.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really think about what that says, it's really speaking to our misperceptions and framing things like someone did something to me, but you know what? It's more about them being in the state of being that they are that caused them to do what they did. And it's really not about what happened to you, and just seeing that for what it is, which then, breaks the shield a little crack in the shield where you have compassion for
Yeah.
that fear of where they were coming from. And in my cases with my perpetrators in the VA, I've actually learned to have compassion and to some extent be forgiving because of that, because that compassion leads to forgiveness. But I still got some work to do with that. I'm fine tuning in different ways. And one of those things is going forward, besides meditation, is I've signed up for 3 back-to-back retreats with Ming Tong Gu
Oh,
and really
nice.
in Wisdom Healing Qigong out in Santa Fe this October, and there's something I'm doing with Kristen Halstis in
Costa
Costa
Rica.
Rica in January.
Yeah,
So
nice.
yeah, so it's a process. I'm still moving along the healing path and tweaking some of the things that need to be fine tuned,
Yeah.
it's again it comes back to making that choice.
Yeah. Oh,
If
thank you.
you know
Yeah, you're very fortunate to have so many wonderful teachers around you and the capacity to be able to go and see them in person and do this work. Not everyone has access to that, but we
yeah.
all have access to other people in our lives, our ability to look within, prayer, writing, using the physical body. Um,
Well, we're right, exactly. And, even exercise, a good diet, good sleep, just basics. And then, like you say, meditation, Tai Chi, Qi Gong, there's a lot of, energy psychology, the Course in Miracles. It's, a conscious teacher that you get spiritual teachings from. I mean, there's many different, I kind of do an eclectic version of all that, at one point or another. Sometimes, it overlaps, but yeah.
Dream work. You mentioned that with your beautiful time with Michael, that, during the fasting and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and that was instrumental. It allowed me because of how it broke me down, fasting and lack of sleep, and just you break through all those defense mechanisms. You get right to the
yeah.
core of it in your unconscious. And I literally did months and years of work within a week. But
Wow.
I was at that point of desperation. I had to, because if
Wow.
this didn't work, it was over. It
Yeah.
was done.
Yeah. Oh my
So.
goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
and the funny thing, you kind of hinted around journaling, and
Yeah.
something that, you know, the process of writing my book and drudging up all that stuff, because part of my book is not just addressing the issues I was whistleblowing about. I specifically identified the tactics that were toxically used against me maliciously and
Hmm.
the impact it had. And as a Marine, to allow myself to be vulnerable, this is how it affected me emotionally and what have you in different aspects of my life. I was kind of hesitant about that because I'm thinking I'm showing my weakness because this is how it affected me. Marines don't do that.
Yeah.
So I did it because people had to know what happens. And in the process of writing that, and very tearfully at times, it was intense. And it's almost a form of journaling when you write a
Yes.
book, with that kind of topic. And I found it to be very cathartic and very healing just in the process of writing the book. It was very validating and gave me a voice in ways
Yes.
where they were trying to shut me down.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
yeah, that is very effective. So I recommend journaling in whatever form that takes. So that definitely allows you to get in touch with, those emotions or those deeper dark places that you need to shed the light on. So yeah, that's very, very relevant as well.
Well, we're coming full circle because we're talking about the importance of speech, whether it's through writing or public
Hmm.
speaking or speaking like you are and I are right now, or even speaking to yourself, speaking
Hmm.
to your own heart. And the image that came to me on this part was the yin and yang, the masculine, feminine principles, the dark light. And I remember, we're really good in this society about strengthening yang, the masculine principle of doing and creating and having an aliveness that's in the light and strong and loud. Just go to any stadium for any venue and you'll see yang energy. But to strengthen the yin energy, that is something that we aren't as practiced with. And this is to have a really strong relaxation response, a really strong and robust ability to be vulnerable, to have the powerfulness of surrender, of release, of letting go. And I see that Marines don't blah blah blah, we don't complain and we don't talk about our vulnerabilities, but that was like a yin strengthening to combat the yang.
It's funny that you say that because, one of the things I've observed in general over the last 20 years going through my MSW program, all the spiritual, meditation and retreat programs I've been through, even ASEP for that matter, it's predominantly women.
Yes.
Now, here is something, and hopefully not to be taken the wrong way, but emotionality is the gateway to the spiritual realm. You have to acknowledge and express your truth, and that comes through the emotional component. When that is stuffed, when that is suppressed, when that is not acknowledged, which is the case with most men, not all men. So let me be clear, men tend to do that and not express their emotions and shut the emotions down. Not all men do that. And predominantly women do express their emotions. And so, in an ironic kind of way, with emotions being the gateway to the spiritual realm, largely speaking, in some ways, it's almost like women are more enlightened than men because they're further along, you know, the path of awareness and awakening and acknowledging that part of us in human form that's so important to acknowledge as you move along, you know, your path of atonement in this life that we all do, is humans. And I've always wondered about that. And interestingly, most of my friends are female,
Yeah. Yeah.
predominantly.
Yeah.
For me, because of my life experience that we don't have time to get into even before, the Marine Corps and the emotional physical abuse I, experienced as a child,
Mm.
you know, and so there was some PTSD components even then, even before I went into the military, and coming to terms with that and going to the softer, more gentle side. I like that aspect when that is able to come out in me, the more softer, gentle side of compassion.
Yeah.
That's what I resonate with, and it just so happens a lot of my mentors also have been female that
Oh,
have helped me along that way because I seriously was way, way, I mean, extreme yang, not
yeah.
good. It really wasn't good. And so being around
Toxic.
the yin, right, and being around the yin,
The yin.
female predominant energy for me has been very good. And that's kind of honestly what I prefer.
Beautiful. I love the
Yeah.
merging of the healthy yin and the healthy yang
Mhm.
is where we're heading. And I
Mhm.
just want to say, as we come to our closing, just to emphasize that anger is emotion. And I would say that many toxic yang expressions are like anger on steroids. So the emotion is there, but it's the variety of emotion and it's the intensity and flavor of the different types of emotion and how they blend. So anyway, yeah, oh, this has been so delightful, and I'm so grateful for you to have shared such deeply personal parts of your story and your life. Thank you. And I imagine that that was not easy to do, but I offer such acknowledgement to you and courage for that because I know it's going to help people.
Right, and I appreciate your acknowledgement of that, but I do have to say that as time has gone on, I'm very comfortable in expressing those things now because I'm just learned to be comfortable with it, and I realized in the process of writing my book that people need to understand that, and particularly men, that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to express emotion, because unless you do, it's going to stay stuffed, and you're going to stay stuck. And it's very important to navigate through that and balance out, your energy with more yang as you had brought up. Yeah,
More yin, yay, yin, in with yin.
yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Ted. Is there anything you'd like to say before we say goodbye for today?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, Lori.
Great. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's podcast. If you want to learn more, you can visit my website for podcast and resources at hopshealingtips.com. You can also like, share, and subscribe to this channel. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and is not providing healthcare advice. Please seek guidance from your professional healthcare team should you need assistance.